Okay, so death scenes are sad, right? We all know that, but how do you write them? Oi, hello everybody. Welcome back to another one of my art videos. I am Snow. Today we're going to be talking about death writing. More than just death writing. The whole process of illustrating and writing, the ending of a character, or just the life aspect of the story. Okay, so how do you write a death scene? Not just correctly, but make it impactful. To create an experience more for the reader that means something, that will impact the story itself, while also impacting the reader. Simultaneously, of course. What will it mean from here on out? Story-wise, like, you've got a story, you got a beginning, a middle, and end. But, like, what will it mean from here on out? Will the character even die? Will the character come back to life later? Or will it just be the end of that character's story? Or will the character die, but it won't be the end of that character's story because of the legacy that they leave? The big thing about death in stories is that it's huge in real life to us, outside of fiction. How do you do something like that as a fictional story writer? How do you mimic fiction through non-fiction? Well, vice versa, technically, but I'm not re-recording that. Back to professionalism, though. Much like many other character arcs, you need to set it up long-term. If you want a story to be a long one, where a bunch of characters get their time to shine in their specific ways, this means that there's going to be a beginning and an ending to that character's story. Sometimes character stories aren't concluded by the end of the story, though, which means, of course, that even at the end of the story, you don't really have a conclusion there, because their conclusion comes with the end of the story. But I digress. There's more to a character arc than the introduction and, well, their death. Death can mean more than just, well, that. Death. For instance, say you've got a character that you introduce in a way that'll show people that what this character is going to be from here on out. Or you can make it seem like this character is going to be one thing, but then in a dramatic plot twist, the character becomes something else entirely. This isn't exactly bad writing, per se. This happens a lot. You're given an impression of a character at one stage of its lifestyle, the character's lifestyle throughout the story, and then suddenly, like, when you think that he's just some serious dude, he's actually, really silly when given the right circumstances. You probably just introduce him in, like, some sort of bad mood. Or better yet, you introduce him in a bad mood because his family just, tried to kill him. Or died. Or both, I guess. That could also be the case. This is another meaning of the term killing off a character. It's something that happens extremely commonly, and there are different ways of doing this. Though there is, of course, the ever-so-common trope of turning a hero into a villain, or vice versa, where a character was once one thing, like, say, a hero, but then pulls a 180 and becomes a villain, or in some cases, the villain. There are ways of doing it good. There are ways of doing it badly. But when you kill off a character, the killing of that character is when that character performs the aforementioned 180. Another way of killing off a character might be making the character one thing at one point in the story, but then everything is changed. But then, what about a story's death? What if, let's say, you make a story seem lighthearted at first, but then slowly change it around every so often? It's actually quite rare that a story could be made without it dying this way. And it's also very rare for a story dying in this manner for it to necessarily not be branded as a bad thing. I mean, a lot of people might call it a bad thing, but not everybody who says they're a critic is necessarily a critic. But I'll get on that bandwagon sometime in a different video, actually. Not this time. I'm not going to be criticizing critics in a video talking about how to write death scenes. But right now, I'm going to talk about dying things. A very rare instance of a character... A very rare instance of a story not dying is if the story is deliberately meant to have a constant change. Okay. A very rare instance of a story not dying is if the character... Let's try that again. A very rare instance of a story not dying is if the story is deliberately meant to have a constant change. I'd like to draw attention to one that is a more cartoonish, quote-unquote, story, which is South Park. I say quote-unquote because it's not technically a story. It's not exactly, it's kind of ongoing kind of thing where one episode transfix onto another episode where it all just, piles on story arcs. Because South Park is kind of episodical. South Park is relevant because of how it constantly changes. It becomes relevant because it refers to real life issues. Back to, the whole fiction with non-fiction kind of thing. So it's really difficult to say that something like South Park has died, or even something like The Simpsons, because it also refers to real life issues. The difference, of course, is that South Park's animation began so quickly because of its simplicity. And, The Simpsons is a more basic animation, so it takes longer. But, because everybody has different tastes that make one or the other seem bad, it's very difficult to really judge them because everybody has different tastes. But let's get away from this tangent for a second and talk more about the actual death thing, like actual dying. How do you know that a character is going to die? Not as the reader, but as the author. Well, it should be obvious, right? You write a character you might know. Of course, cause the author... Well, it should be obvious, right? You write a character you might know, of course, cause an author is all-knowing, right? But that isn't necessarily the case. Authors are very famous for making happy accidents in a lot of cases. So an author might not already know that a character will die when that character is introduced. So an author might not already know that a character will die when that character is introduced. How the story is going to go, though, is quite unpredictable since the writer and the reader has kind of this resonation where one can impact the other, even backwards wise, where the reader could impact the author. So things can be a bit unpredictable. Unfortunately, this can be a bit of a bad thing, because when an author wants a story to go in one direction, it's very difficult to keep it going in that direction. There's a lot of criticism hitting the story because of where it seems to be going. Can you write a story that doesn't have any death at all? It's possible, but it's definitely not without its own criticism, no matter what. There's always going to be a critic, but is that a bad thing? I don't know. Concluding this whole thing about death, this more or less was kind of like just my own essay of some sort. Testing out, me trying to record and go into, a talk about death, about a writing style, about literature, about art, about artists and what they have in their brains for what they've learned. So, I hope you learned something from this. Peace.